Well, that's a very, very important question, I think. That is, for instance, when you read the gossip pages here, which of course I do, you'll find an amazing adulation towards Hollywood and its stars. In fact, also towards your own stars, which is totally out of hand here. I think what we should all learn to do is ignore Hollywood. It is not they export their hamburgers and their chicken wings, but when you export film, which has a direct effect on the way people think, feel and remember, and a direct effect on their dreams and the dreams of their children, I think you're dealing with something that is very, very, very important and very fragile, because you cannot just use that as a commodity. If you go to a meeting in Hollywood, we're talking about bums on seats. You are all bums on seats. I always regard people fellow dreamers. And very often, especially in the past when I started, and people thought these films will never sell, they were all wrong. Which still angers me at times, how difficult it was to make films that actually meant something to me, but also meant a lot to others, and they were not done with big egos and big budgets. But often I was asked, for whom do you actually make these films? And then finally I found the right answer. And I pointed at everybody in the audience, for you, for you, for you. And I kept going like that. Because for every individual you make your film, not for the lot of you, because people together are rats, and they behave like rats, which is unbelievable, because that's where our strength lies. We should also combine and fight, you know, and especially in film. I think it is time now in Kerala, and I find in West Bengal, you have a similar type of creativity and a similar type of spirit. And I think it is time now for the cinema here in Kerala to actually start moving, 20 years ago there was a big spirit here with Aravindan and all these people, John Abram, and suddenly people were interested, but it didn't travel far. Now is the time to actually start again.
Right. And your one shot at Hollywood in terms of the film Father Damien and the leprosy thing was a very disappointing effort, right? So you would never touch that shore again.
Well, I beg every filmmaker here and everybody that has dreams about making films to keep control, because they say I'm a bit difficult. I'm not difficult at all. Ask my wife. But if you don't have control over your films, I made this film which, when we had the first cut ready, it was bigger than Gandhi. It was a fantastic film. And several people sat there and said, this is marvelous. And when then the producers got together and said, this is not commercial enough. They were all wrong, you see. They were all wrong, because the greed, the hatred and the ignorance of us all together is pathetic. That film was then butchered and cut to pieces, and instead of all the long brushstrokes we used, cut into little snippets. Later on, when the film flopped, they asked me to restore it, which I did, but never got its full glory back again, you know. So I beg every filmmaker, keep control, whatever happens. You make the film. The producers are not making the film, they're helping you. If you have a good producer, he helps you make a film. As soon as there is any fights appearing in the actual making, it's the most awful. I've had it twice that I was not in charge, and I'm not a power freak at all. It's just people run. They don't actually understand. Only when the every film I've made, people advise me, don't make a film, it can't work. It's not You can't make a film about old people falling in love with an old woman with cancer. It's not possible. They were always wrong because after the film's been completed, a woman still, I think it was screened this morning, that still runs in Japan after 12 years. For 12 years. How is that possible?
Yeah.
You know.
In terms of what one might call a Paul Cox oeuvre, there are now, I think, people write about or speak about certain distinguishing features. There is your concern about the way you use light, the way you use music, for instance. It's a very strong element in a film. The intensity of human relations, the intactness of human dignity in the films. Now, this is obviously an extension of your personality, and therefore what I want to ask you is, you've gone through a traumatic personal experience in one sense, because you're a recipient of a liver transplant. And how transformative has that been in terms of your perspective or your attitude to filmmaking? Has it made a huge difference, or is it a continuum?
No, I'm in my second coming now. But after a very busy life, I was always too busy to even live properly or to have a proper meal. I was too busy. Never been ill. I'm suddenly being told that I have 3 months to live. And that does change a few things. I would advise everybody to go through the experience. I don't regret it at all. Of course, the pain and the agony, the uncertainty, and the enormous sense of loss that you feel when you have to depart, that is terrible. But I'm now hopefully turning it into a positive experience and make a film that touches upon organ donation, because modern science has developed a lot of ridiculous war machinery that is so lethal. It's just very frightening. At the same time, they've also developed organ transplantation. I live by the grace of a dead person, and your body heals slowly, but the mind doesn't travel with it. It is you're fully aware of that enormous, deep, great grief of man, and you somehow have no option but, of course, to proceed. But my steps are more careful, and I have much more time for the underprivileged, for the people that don't speak. And I'm much more concerned about everything on the fringe of this madness, because the world we have created is relentless, and it lacks the true potential we have as human beings is not being explored at all in this world. And you see it all so very clearly when you lie in your hospital bed and watch the world. People come and visit one another, and then you look out of the window and you see the clouds passing by. And when people ask me, what do you want for Christmas? I always say, one little raindrop, a passing cloud, and a smile. Because it's all this horrific consumerism that has caught us all. If we don't keep buying things, we perish. What sort of society is that? Doesn't make sense. And all these points that I had before already, of course, concerned about, they have all become very big now. It's very different. And life is very precious and immensely beautiful.
So there's a kind of revalorization of life, of living. And it's very interesting because your films, even before you had this personal, shall we say, crisis, there was this whole undercurrent of terminality, intimation of mortality, and then it occurs to it moves from the film into the filmmaker, and then the filmmaker is now looking back at life anew. So I suppose some of that is going to rub off in your next film.
Of course, but Joseph, all the things I finally, I make a film about a woman who's dying of cancer, and it happens to me then, and so you have to be careful. But of course now, the film I'm making now and developing is the actual hospital that saved my life. And in that respect, I'm very thankful to Australia because I've always lived a fairly basic life. I don't believe in great wealth and fortune. I try to somehow look after my children, whatever. But I've always believed that every individual has the right to get the same education and health as anybody else. I've always think that is the basis of every society, and if that is not the same, forget it. There shall never be any justice. Everything is based on injustice and greed. So I have no insurance. My dear wife, who has also had a liver transplant, whom I met in the hospital, she had an insurance. We had exactly the same treatment. And if I'd been in America, I would be dead, because the first thing, my credit card would not actually stand up to the amount, because of course it's a huge thing. And so we all have the right to live. We all have the right to die properly, but we all should have the same treatment on the land. I cannot understand when I hear in America, when I see a banner in a crowd and it says, Obama is a socialist, boo, boo, naughty boy. Well, sorry to say, I'm a socialist.
Wow. Music has been a very strong element in your films, and I've heard you or read that and therefore, since music is so important to you, you're very impatient with lesser music, with what we call, what you think is lesser music. So I'm curious to know, how do you see India is a film, culture with a lot of music. Have you had an example, an occasion to taste a bit of that, and how do you react to that? Would you consider that terrible music, or is that an essential part of the Indian film ethos?
No, I think Indian music is absolutely, with Indian music you can actually travel and see visuals. You can go across the mountains and fly. Indian music is fantastic music in terms of visuals. But you remember the extraordinary moment when in Patha Panchali, when the husband comes home and with this little sari, after having been away for a long time, and his daughter has died, but the mother can't tell him that the daughter is dead. And he says, this sari is for our daughter. And then the mother screams, and you hear Ravi Shankar screaming in his son. And that fusion of music and visuals, that is, the reverberations of that, if people paid attention properly, that for me was a very important moment in the whole history of film. Because music is the basis of all creativity. Yeats said, everybody's life is a symphony of sorts. The Indians really understand what music is about, because you can actually drift away with music. I've been to so many. I once went with Aravindan to a small village here in Kerala, and he put an old dirty sheet on the wall, and projected one of his films. Right. This was years ago. And the actual joy that it gave his people, it was a very significant moment in my life, because the simplicity of it all was great. The enthusiasm of the people was fantastic. And then they started to sing and to play. And it was absolutely mesmerizing. When I first came to Kolkata in 1830, it's a long time ago, instead of people saying, let's have a drink or something, they invited you home and then they would sing for you, bring out an instrument. Well, where else do you find this?
while you are here, a package of your films are being shown here, among them Innocence, which incidentally I like very much. And before I forget, there has been some discussion about whether another Malayalam film by Blessy called Pranayam is based on your film. I think you've already reacted to that. Have you had an occasion to look at that film or hear more about the film? I think the initial reaction was you have no problem with somebody being inspired by your film. But then you would ask for a copy of the film. Has it come to you?
Yes, where is the copy? No, I think it's marvelous. We're here to share our lives and our creativity and whatever, and our thoughts, our feelings, our hearts. If this had happened in America, even a slight copy of it, there would be people. People have actually been pushing me and said, "Why don't you sue him and everything?" Because everybody thinks it's good news.
Yeah.
It's nonsense. I'm very, very happy that this man hopefully stole the whole of my film. But at least he owes me a copy. I want to see it.
Well, I don't know whether it's true that the film is based on it, because I haven't seen the film, but I'm just going by the press reports.
There's too many rumors.
Okay. The other interesting thing about you, and this may be true of some, but not all directors, that you worked with a crew which has been with you, I think, from the beginning, and your camera person, for instance. And how does this work? And every film, at least in the initial phases, I don't know if it must be much easier now, has been a struggle for you to make a film, to get the budgets. And you're still a $1 million, $2 million budget filmmaker, right? And how has that worked, keeping this team together? And when you transition from a camera person yourself and have another camera person, you yet have them with you all the time?
Well, firstly, I think you can't make a film on your own yourself. You can write it, conceive it. You cannot. You can only do a few aspects of the filmmaking process. So in that process, you need people that you can totally trust and love. And that started a long time ago when we did a film called Costas. It was one of the earlier films. The people that got together, I was teaching at the time, and a few students that were very bright came to help me, and they're still with me. And then I met a sound man who actually had done nothing but commercial work. And he suddenly think, my God, this is also all the knowledge and love he had for the medium he could put into something. And any of these people, we have maybe part of them died, but we probably have the oldest crew in the world, you know. But still, straight away, we're all standing by to make this film, and we're all coming here.
Right, in Kerala,
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us a little more about that? What the theme is, or it's too premature?
No, the script was finished. I wrote a book when I was supposed to be dying, and it's called Tales from the Cancer Ward. And I wrote it in the hospital. Sometimes I hallucinated and I scribbled things on the sheets and whatever. And finally I turned it into some sort of book, and the book came out and I donated it to the hospital to thank them. So then the book travelled, and it is doing reasonably well, I think. But it is for the hospital, and people kept telling me it reads like a thriller in a way, because if you don't know what happened, you think I'm going to die, you know. It's a bit pathetic. But then they said, well, why don't you write a film script? So I thought, well, I started to write. And for some reason I had a dream about a time I had in China, and I involved China a little bit. It's based upon the book in terms of chronological order, the inner voice of the man I'm using, but then it becomes a love story, and it is quite a spatial love story, because you think very big in a hospital when they've told you to die. It's not more you and death, it's a big thing. And then there's, especially when I could still move about, sometimes against anybody's wishes, I would drive out of town, sometimes 100 kilometers, just to lie in the grass and look at the sky, the stars. That was a direct connection that gave me life. And I learned a lot from that now, also to use that in this film. It's a spatial love story. You'll find it's about a sculptor who is very successful, and he makes beautiful things. And then one day he suddenly doesn't feel well, and the doctor tells me you've got 3 months to live, which happened to me exactly. So that experience is too good to miss out on. I'm using that. But for the rest, it is a very spatial. Then he meets a woman from the East, because I think if you want to live a proper life in this world, you've got to have one leg in the East and one in the West, or vice versa. And especially every person in the West should have one leg in the East. Because if we don't understand one another like that, if we don't interact, we don't have a world, They're not separate worlds. Both think they're mysterious East, but I think the woman he meets comes from the East, and he falls desperately in love. And that horrible sense of loss you feel when you're fading is of course intensified that way. But he realizes that he actually has never loved like that in his life, because it's totally a giving love. You can't take anything. And love should always be a joy in another person, and it should always be a giving thing. So the theme, I think, is very powerful. And it was, I already did all the research and went to China to do it with the Chinese situation. But when I came back to India, I never thought I would see India again, after my operation, because they said you have to be careful when you travel, etc. When I got here, and first we went to Goa, and then I came here, and I thought, I feel India much more than China. I'm an Indian on that level. So we were talking one night, and the owner of the guest house we were staying in, or the beach resort or whatever it was, he came and talked to us, and he said, why don't we do this together? And I said, well, it's very good. So now he's got 25% of the film is totally Indian, and it'll probably grow even bigger. So it's fantastic how that, I always think life is more fate because of faith than choice. This happened because I have had a lot of trouble connecting with my people overseas back to actually cancel the whole Chinese expedition. Fortunately, we didn't sign any contract, so now it's all going to be Indian.
When we speak about faith, I think you've been an agnostic, perhaps a cynic earlier. Has that changed? Are you a more spiritual person? Have you become religious?
It's again a very good question. It's very relevant. It's a very relevant question. I didn't see God. I'm sure I died actually. I know what happened when I died. I had maybe half an hour or something that I was gone.
Right.
But it was quite beautiful. You slowly lose your conscience. It doesn't go straight like that. And you can actually travel through the centuries. And you realize that death is nothing big, because trillions and trillions of people have done it before you. That was a man's awareness. I thought, what's the big deal here? But there was one thing that pulled me back, and that was the memory of my mother, my grandchild, my daughter, 2 other children. There was something in the actual physicality of life. I thought, no, I can get back and have a little bit more, because I haven't finished. Please let me allow to go back. So I woke up, came back, and you might think this is a bit strange, but I think that's what happened. Now, whether I found God, I found great spirituality amongst all of us, amongst the whole thing, but I found a great power in the great power in nature. So much more refined. I look at a tree in a different way. I think religion to me is despicable, because I was brought up as a Catholic in a very strict way. So I even had a little go at trying to become a priest.
Right.
Fortunately, they kicked me out.
Yeah.
But I adore people that actually have the tradition of religion, and I'm peaceful at it. But when religion becomes a way of life, and when people say, but in the book of so-and-so it says this, that, it's nonsense. There is definitely, we're all part of a great conscience or a subconscious. But I wouldn't go, that is the God of man. The concept of God is the God of man. They have created that God. And for the sake of God, we kill, plunder, and rape, and destroy. I can't see what that has to do with God. I don't know whether that's a clear answer, but...
Yeah, but it gives us an idea.
I'm more not religious, more spiritual than people.
Yes. In your film, in your short film on Van Gogh called Vincent, there is this. The whole film, I think, is based on Vincent's letters to his brother Theo, and there's one letter, if I remember right, where Vincent talks in terms of liberation being, or from life being, moving to another star, from one star to the other, and what you say seems to approximate a bit to that. The follow-on question is, you've done two such biographic short films, Nijinsky and Vincent, and then there was this biopic on you, which you laid yourself open to, shall we say. How did you do that? I mean, I would think it needs a lot of courage. It needs a lot of, doesn't it? Was it something you felt duty bound to do, or was it something natural? Was it an idea which was put in your mind?
The documentary on my dying.
Yeah.
The snuff movie.
Yeah, it's called snuff, as you crudely put it. Yeah.
It started. He came to me and then he wanted to. Didn't start as a film. He wanted to make a record because I had a few weeks to live then officially. Mm-hmm. So at the beginning of the film, I can't look at it because I'm a dying man. Dead man walking. And it started like that. When there was some hope, a little flutter of hope came into the piece. Of course, that was not good for the actual film because he got into big trouble. The big climax of the film would have been my funeral, So he missed out on that one, so he had to make another film. And it wasn't easy for him. I think it's difficult, but I can't look at that film, no comment on it.
I'm sure he's not feeling cheated.
No, he had a hard time.
Right.
Coming back to one more thing about Van Gogh's thing and Nijinsky. Twice in my life I stopped everything else and went for two people that both had only 10 years, both in the eyes of the world went mad, so to speak, both changed the future of their medium. Vincent van Gogh was the forefather of modern art. Vaslav Nijinsky, the great, great dancer, was the forefather of modern dance. Both had 10 years of activity, great activity, and both had incredibly unhappy, lonely lives. Now, what we learn from these things, I want people to see, I found when I read Nijinsky's diary as a young man, I was totally overcome. I wasn't a filmmaker then, but that diary always lingered because he had the language of feeling, not the language of thought. And thought is very much a conditioned process. There was a language of feeling, and then I read Vincent's letters to his brother.
Yeah.
That's the language of feeling. They're fantastic letters. And he was a marvelous writer, you know. So I took out 3 or 4 years. These are very difficult films to make. And Nijinsky almost cost me my life. It was very difficult. It's done on 35mm. I shot it myself, but it was an insane operation. I think that's how I got sick.
Oh, they were brilliant films.